Sandoval County and see all of you guys. So thank you all so much for being here today. This is a really exciting day here in Sandoval County, and I'm really excited to be here for Bob, who is somebody who has been there for me over the years, but I think more importantly has been doing really amazing things for our democracy, especially in recent years, and so it's really a pleasure to be here supporting him today. I don't know if somebody is going to be announcing or acknowledging folks in the room, but I do just personally want to make sure I give a shout out to your Sandoval County Treasurer, Laura Montoya over here. I'll take this off your shoulders, Bob. So we do have some elected folks here in the room. I already, of course, acknowledged Laura, who's also a candidate for Congress, in case you didn't know. Okay. And then we have some candidates. So we also have Bill Woldman, who's running for Corrales Village Council District 2. Wherever Bill is. My friend Gary Tripp, who's running for State Rep District 44. Who's running for Senate District 23 is here. My other dear friend, Leah Aki-Bathkowitz, who's running for County Commission District 2. That's the commission here in Sandoval County, right? Janet Blair is running for Corrales City Council 5th District. And then Alex Highland, we're going to pronounce it that way, is also running for County Commission here. Michelle Frechette running for Municipal Judge. Yay! Oh, that's right. Pronounce your name again.
Mandana Shushtari, running for the District Attorney.
Mandana is running for District Attorney because MOL is finally retiring, and by the end of this year, I'm going to be able to pronounce your name the way you pronounce it.
That's fine.
But that is not today.
Just remember that the Perls.
Yes, just remember it at the polls. And I think it's not a surprise that so many candidates are here at an event for county clerk, right? Because at the end of the day, our democracy, especially here in New Mexico, comes down to the work that our 33 county clerks do in their counties, and making sure that every single polling location is accessible, and making sure that the ballots look right and are accurate, and that every single voter that comes into a polling place is greeted with a smile and a competent, well-trained poll official that knows what they're doing, that's able to easily facilitate access to the ballot. And that is exactly why Bob is running for this position, because not only does he want to make sure that all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, like a county clerk should do, but he also has a vision for what our democracy can be in this state. And I think we're really at a crossroads here in New Mexico right now. We do, Terry said it very well. We have a wonderful election system here in New Mexico. It's very accessible. It's also very fair, and it has a lot of integrity. It has a lot of security. We've been doing a ton of work on this front, as Terry mentioned, going all the way back to 2006 when we started with paper ballots, and then we do post-election audits, and we do so many different things to make sure our elections are protected. At the same time, we're doing things to make sure they're accessible, right? That every citizen who wants to register to vote can do so in person, online, now at a polling place, all the way up to election day, so during all the early voting period. This is amazing, but there is still more to be done. And a county clerk, I think when our state founding fathers created the position back in 1912, right? They were envisioning, probably, a little old lady or little old gentleman with glasses, making lots of lists and keeping records, carefully in order. And of course, that is still part of the job, right? We have to keep the records carefully in order and make sure everything is done properly. But I can tell you from personal experience as a county clerk, it's also become so much more than that. Not only is it making sure everything's done right, but it's making sure that the voters know, right? When, where, and how to cast their ballot. It's making sure that the information is out there, that it's accessible, that the ballot box is accessible. It's making sure that our elections are secure. Being a county clerk is no longer just being a clerk. You have to be an IT project manager now as a county clerk. You have to have that kind of expertise. And I personally believe that we are on the cusp of even greater things in New Mexico, such as opening up our primary elections, which is something that he has been a champion. And I'm telling you, if you're in this room today and you may be still on the fence about that concept, you may be kind of like, oh, I'm not sure, whatever. I will tell you, as a lifelong member of the Democratic Party, that is the path to our future as a party, is to keep being inclusive, to keep opening the door to participation, to keep bringing people in so that people know that they are embraced and that their voices want to be heard by the Democratic Party. And that is what Bob embraces. That's what he's been fighting for all of these years. And it's really been an honor to work with him on this. And we're not there yet. But with people like Bob, and especially Bob himself, in the position of county clerk, we have a better chance of getting where we need to go in the future. So that's why I'm supporting him. That's why I'm here today. I hope all of you will do the same. I mean, I assume if you're here, you're probably already supporting him. But if you're not, this guy is going to knock it out of the park and really bring the Sandoval County Clerk's Office to the next level. And I, for one, am really excited about working with him. Your candidate, Bob Perls.
Thanks so much, Maggie. Wow, I'm humbled. To have a sitting Secretary of State being willing to be the special guest for a clerk position, especially in a competitive primary, is unprecedented, and I truly, truly appreciate it. In many ways, it's really simple. What I want to do, Maggie has pretty much already done. I want to modernize the clerk's office. It's really no longer an administrative function. It's almost an IT cybersecurity function. It's a voter engagement function. It is so much more than it was originally imagined to be a clerk. And so what I want to do is just give you a real quick bio. Most of you know me. Talk very briefly about some ideas, but mostly Maggie and I want to take some questions. So real briefly, I grew up in Albuquerque Public Schools, 1st through 12th grade, went out of state, got a bachelor's at Pomona College in Claremont, California, got a master's in healthcare from the University of Maryland. Had a chance to start a company in Albuquerque, and so I started a company called Monitech, which was a medical technology company that I founded and ran for 25 years. And it took me from cardiology and critical care medicine to really running an IT operation with both direct and contract IT folks. We databased diagnostic cardiology tests. We did a lot of telehealth work. I did a lot of outreach to the Navajo Nation and worked with many of the Pueblo communities here in Sandoval County. And I sold it in 2008 after 25 years. In the middle of all of that, I ran for the state legislature and represented Bernalillo, Corrales, and Rio Rancho for 2 terms in the state house. I was, in fact, I think the last Democrat to hold House District 44 that Gary's running for. We wish him all the luck. Yep. And I had the opportunity to do some policy work in my 30s, which I really loved. I thought I could maybe take the next step. I ran for Congress unsuccessfully in 2000, ran for the PRC unsuccessfully in 2004, ran into a buzzsaw by the name of Ben Ray Lujan, and in a 4-way race came in second to Ben Ray, who's had quite the career and is quite the representative and soon U.S. Senator. And that was it. I hung up my political spurs at that point. I doubled down to work on getting my company sold between 2004 and 2008. Sold my company, got cashed out in 2008. I worked on a cybersecurity and telehealth startup in 2009, which is another avenue of where I gained some experience and some technology background. I think that's going to help as clerk. I worked with a guy, Gerard Galliano, who was a 1-term Corrales Village counselor, who's one of the leading cybersecurity experts in the country. He's on my steering committee, and he's going to help move Sandoval County and hopefully contribute to what Maggie's doing at the state level in a very meaningful way. He's a super smart guy. Couldn't get it funded. '09 was a tough year to get startups funded, as you may recall. And I really had decided I wanted to do public service. I wanted to do public administration. I was an early supporter of President Obama in '07. I was on a couple of his national advisory committees and had sort of hoped for a presidential appointment, but when that didn't happen, I decided, hey, I'm gonna do something where there's an objective application process, and I spent a year applying for and then getting into the State Department as a U.S. diplomat, as a Foreign Service officer. And so my wife, Joan, who I should have introduced, Joan is right here. And my sister, Lynn Perls, behind her, and my dad, Steve Perls. So Joan and I went on this amazing adventure where we were in DC for a year, mostly German language training, but I was also going through various diplomatic training, much of which had to do with how you protect personally identifiable information, how you work with our various intelligence agencies, how I become a consular officer, which in some ways is very similar to what a clerk does. And then we had the good fortune to serve at the U.S. consulate in Frankfurt for 2 years. Had a 30-day TDY in the Gambia, West Africa, where I ran the consular section down there for 30 days. Then we were in Ottawa, Canada at the U.S. Embassy for 18 months, and I'd never served in the military and decided I wanted to volunteer for a high-threat post. And so Joan came back home. I volunteered for the U.S. Embassy in Islamabad, Pakistan, and that was my last overseas assignment. And it was really in Islamabad where I worked very closely with U.S. military, with the U.S. intelligence communities and law enforcement communities. Got some great training, forensic cyber training that I think will also be applicable to the clerk's office. But my mother and my dad's wife was sick with cancer, and she had about a year to live, so we quit the Foreign Service, came back home to Perls, and she died within a year of me coming back home, so I'm glad that I wasn't halfway around the world for that. And upon returning, I founded a nonprofit called New Mexico Open Primaries, which is now called New Mexico Open Elections. It's been very heavily focused on voter engagement. You know, how do we reach out to young voters, to minority communities, to Native American communities specifically is a big interest of mine, because it turns out that those minority communities are disproportionately not registered or registered as independents. And so in my mind, if you want to have a fully functioning democracy with the kind of mandate to govern that comes with full-throated participation in a democracy, then you've got to engage young people, you've got to engage these independents, you've got to give them a chance to sample, whether it's the Democratic Party, Republican Party, or Libertarian Party. You know, as Democrats, I think both Maggie and I really, really believe that the way to market the Democratic Party is by giving them a taste. If they get to vote for Democratic candidates, they'll like what they see, they'll like what they'll hear, and they'll stick with us in the general election.
Yay.
Yeah. Thank you. So I've worked closely with our representative Damon Eli and with many others, Representative Mo Maestas, Natalie Figueroa, Joy Garrett, Bill Pratt, rest his soul, who just recently passed away, and other amazing, mostly Democrats, but some moderate Republicans like Jim Dines, who unfortunately has left the state, to try to pass open primaries, to try to pass free and fair ballot access for independent candidates who often have to turn in 10 times the number of ballot signatures as Dems and Republicans, to end gerrymandering, same-day voter registration that Bert and Terry and Corrales and Divisible have been very involved with, both same-day voter registration and automatic voter registration. These are critical, again, for minority communities who tend not to be registered, but if we as candidates can turn them on, often it's in the last couple of days of an election, they should have the right to walk up and register to vote.
Yep.
And due to a new bill, there's a limited ability to do that on an optional basis. We hope to continue to expand that. hopefully to the point where an independent could walk up same day and ask for a Republican or a Democratic ballot. And we're still working hard this session. We've got an open primaries bill sponsored by Senator Bill Tallman and Representative Damon Eli for what we call semi-open primaries that would allow independents to vote in partisan primaries. So, you know, that's, I think, a long way of wrapping up and saying I've got the technology background, the cybersecurity background, the political experience, both to run a winning campaign and then to do what I think will be a full-blown voter outreach effort once in the clerk's office. And I've got at least a pretty good working knowledge of the election code and how elections work, what the kinds of reforms that I could help the State Clerks Association work through. And they tend to be a little conservative at times, wouldn't you say? Yeah. And so there's you know, a few people have said, why are you running for clerk? Hopefully I'm laying out why it's not an administrative position, why in fact it's an incredibly important position that protects our vote, that prevents fraud, but there are state and national opportunities for leadership, much like Maggie's provided. I could see running for president of the statewide County Clerks Association and providing leadership there, as Maggie has. And Maggie, you're co-chair of the national election group?
I'm the president-elect. I'll be the president this summer.
Wow.
So there's even a national group that I could get involved with and both learn and provide some leadership. That's why I'm running. That's why I'm thrilled Maggie's supporting me. I want to thank all of you for coming and hopefully donating. We've got to make a little...
Please donate.
Please donate. We're running about a $20,000 budget. We've raised about $8,000 so far. We need $2,000 to run a bunch of printed material. I'm going to start walking door to door, hopefully with some volunteers in this room in the next couple of weeks. I got elected as state rep because I walked every door 3 times. And I know Leah and Alex have been walking hard, and I guess Gary has been walking too. And that's how you get elected, but you gotta have money, you gotta have support materials, you gotta be able to do mailings. I'm running this as a high-level, sophisticated campaign, maybe in ways that hasn't been done in the past for a clerk's race. And all of you being here is just so gratifying. I'm humbled. If you can write checks, if you can host a house party, if you're willing to volunteer for any of those, please sign up front. And I do want to thank Dana Kohler, who is the creator of this amazing venue. Thank you, Dana. He donated the venue and is only making a very small amount of money on the wonderful wine and beer selection that you've got. So drink up if you want to imbibe. I want to thank Ed Lovato, who's my treasurer. Ed is one of the rising stars in Sandoval County Democratic politics, and I think we'll see him running for office in the near future with my wholehearted support. And I want to thank the hosts and co-hosts, Terry and David Eisenbart, and Bert and Stephanie Cox. Hosting, and then Steve Conrad and Gardner, Carolyn Allen Good, Gary and Jennifer Sims, Paul and Laura Stokes, and a number of the people I just mentioned are on my steering committee. I have an 18-person steering committee and a 5-person IT cyber committee. This is a really robust campaign, and I'm really proud of the volunteers. I would say, you know, if I had to give a gold star to any volunteer, it would probably be Carol. Where is Carol? Carol Good. Carol has created all of the graphics, the material, the graphics for the van, if you saw the van coming in, the brochures, the business cards. It is amazing the hundreds of hours she has put in volunteer time. And this whole campaign is run by volunteers so far. And I'm just, again, so gratified. So with that, thanks. With that, Maggie, come on out.
Can I have the mic for a second? Sure. One of the things I like to do is to help out, and if people are kind of sitting on the fence, if somebody here says, I think I want to donate. If someone here wants to donate $250, I'll match it. Anybody want to do that? Any takers? How about $200? Is there, do we have a?
We got it too many.
Anybody want to donate 100? Somebody?
I
$100?
think a lot of people already wrote checks, but hey, I love this.
All right. Go ahead.
There's a hand out there. Thank you, Will. Thank you, Rod. Rod and Michelle have been such great friends for so long. I wish Michelle all the best in her race. So, let's see. What time is it? It's 4:05. You know, how about we take questions for about 15 or 20 minutes and don't feel like you have